Hi, and welcome to PKs Photography Tips. This is my first educational podcast on photography. I am Patty Kaler, and I will soon be starting my 22nd year of teaching, and I am the owner of PK&J Media Photography. The purpose of my podcast is to assist in the education of my students that are in high school, as well as others that I assist. Repetition of information and having a reference is vital. I will have reviews set up so you can test your knowledge if you wish on Quizlet.com. The podcast will discuss various photography topics such as the functioning of digital cameras, composition techniques, image editing, critiquing, and promoting your images. I also hope to have several shows that include my students' images and their personal critiques of their work. As you get to know your digital camera, we want you to first learn the basic settings that will assist you with exposure. The first three settings you're going to want to learn on your camera are your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter. Once you master these three settings, then we'll move on and we'll learn some more about your digital camera. First, let's take a look at your ISO. ISO stands for International Standards Organization, and on your camera, it is how sensitive the image sensor is to the light that is reflecting onto the sensor. The higher the number, the more sensitive the sensor is to the light. So it can capture images better in lower light. But there is a sacrifice. The higher the number, it affects the quality of your image and it will have more noise in it. Let's look at some examples. Let's take a look at how the different ISO settings will affect the exposure of your image. For example, here we have some sunflower shot with ISO 100, ISO 200, ISO 400, 800, 2000, and my Canon 7D goes up to 6400. All of these shots were set in manual and shot with an aperture of 5.6 and a shutter of 125. So what you need to look at here is how the sensor, which is sensitive to light, how it becomes more sensitive to the light at a higher number. With the same settings on aperture and shutter, with the sensor being more sensitive to the light, you see that it gets overexposed. Now, the reverse would be true for a dark situation. Your exposure would be more correct at the ISO 6400 or maybe the ISO 2000. As you went down in the number with your ISO, the image would record underexposed or black. Here is a similar scene of the sunflowers. And you'll note that I moved the camera to auto exposure and changed the ISO setting, same settings from 100, 200, 400, 800, 2000, and 6400. You'll notice that the exposure is similar because the camera was set on auto. But what happens here is the quality will suffer because the images will have more noise as you increase your ISO setting. So while you can capture the image with a higher ISO where you couldn't before, you do end up with suffering in quality. Here is an example of the noise at ISO 100, and again these are all shot on a Canon 7D. You'll notice that this is 100% quality and there is not very much noise in the background of this picture. This was ISO 100. Let's take a look at ISO 2000. I did take a big jump there, but you will notice with 2000 that there becomes some visible noise inside the photo. These were the settings, f-stop of 7.1 and the shutter was 1250. Now let's take a look at the 6400. You can see a definite quality loss as the noise is really increasing with a higher ISO, and again on the Canon 7D. So if we pull all these up, maybe you can compare here, 6400, 2000, and here's the 100. Big jump from 100 to 2000, but you can see how the quality of the image gets degraded at higher ISOs. Referring to the basic exposure settings of the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed, I'm going to show you the locations of those and how to navigate through your camera. I'm partial to Canon, and I have a Canon 50D here that I'm going to show you for a DSLR, and I have the Canon PowerShot A3100 as a point and shoot to be able to show you how to navigate and find the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. Let's take a look at them. The ISO on the point and shoot, you just have to figure out on your menu or your functions where you're going to see the letters ISO. On the Canon, it is under the function set button here. So if I just push that button, my ISO choice is the very top option for me to choose options on the camera, and I just arrow through to pick what ISO I want and hit the set button. And that's that simple. On the back of the camera, you have your display, and you'll see in the upper right hand corner we have the ISO setting is showing on your display. If you want to change the ISO, on the top of the camera there is a quick function button for the T2i that just push the ISO button, and on the back you'll see on your display that you have options to choose on this camera between 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, and 6400. Let's take a look at a more advanced camera than the T2i. This is the Canon 50D, and its ISO button is also in a similar location on the top of the camera on the right hand side. It is a multi-function button, so you have to push the button down and then you'll see you have an ISO option here. All you have to do again is turn the dial, and you'll see that the ISO goes to 125, 160, 200. So with the more advanced camera, you're getting more ISO speed options available for you to choose from. This goes up to 3200. The 7D is in a similar location, and its ISO speed goes up to 6400. That's all we have for this segment. And again, I hope you find these podcasts informational. Remember, you can test your knowledge at Quizlet.com. My username is pkaler. Feel free to send me suggestions or ask any questions. The best way to reach me is by email at pknjmedia@gmail.com or pkaler@chathamschools.org. Thanks so much for your time. Now go make some beautiful images.